Quickly to say thank you very much to our supporters and sponsors for this event. The whole of the Contemporary Art Programme for the new museum is supported by Arts Council England, so we're very grateful to them for their fantastic endorsement of what we're trying to do. And I'd also like to give a huge thanks to our supporters for this particular part of the Contemporary Art Programme. FBC Manby Bandler are supporting this event, and it's really nice to see people again from FBC with us today, so thank you very much. Okay. A lot of you, I know, have bought season tickets for the whole event, so I know that a number of you were here for the first lecture, but for those that weren't, I'm just going to do a 5-minute, even less, little recap. And I would just say that the support for this programme has really been fantastic, to the point where if you haven't got a season ticket, and you're thinking of coming to future events, and I'll tell you more about the schedule at the end, I'll just advise you to book early to avoid disappointment. Okay. Right. This image, again, for those who weren't here last week, is the work of an artist, Tracey Emin. It's become a sort of signature image for the whole series. It sort of immediately poses a question to us all. What that question might be, I think, is for everybody to determine for themselves, but the whole process that we're engaging in is questioning what we know, what we think we know, and what we hope to learn in the future. The image is courtesy of the Frank Cohen collection, and I'm delighted to say that we've got some members of the Frank Cohen curatorial team here today with us, which is fantastic. And they are, as you know, a major supporter in terms of our opening exhibition. So thanks very much to the Frank Cohen collection. I pointed that way, didn't I? Yeah. Okay. So just to remind you what we're all here for, really, which is the build-up to the opening of the new museum, which happens in the building behind us. And I was saying that, as with our current venue, Rowley's House, the building, in fact, is our biggest exhibit. The music hall itself and the Vaughan's mansion within the footprint of the building, a 13th century mansion, provide a context for the whole programme. They provide a history and a background to what we're trying to do. And we would really want to embrace the history and the particular location that we're in. The Contemporary Art Programme is not happening in a white cube space. It's not happening in a kind of void. It's happening within the structure and the history of this particular institution. And there it was back in the late 19th century, I think I'll say, just to cover myself. That was the interior. Incredibly active institution. Was doing all sorts of things. It's a very hard act to follow. They were innovating through the early, mid, late 19th century in ways that I think we can learn from and revisit. There were amazing things happening to do with new technology and new ideas. And I introduced last time 3 significant things, really, that were part of this. There was the development of museums themselves in the mid-19th century. There was the development of the music hall as an institution which had aims to do with entertainment, enlightenment, engaging with new ideas. And there was the invention of photography. Those 3 things were really the sort of backdrop to the amazing period that this represents. They were doing exhibitions, they were doing events, they were encouraging people to get involved. There was a kind of temperance agenda set against the musical development. But it really was about being at the forefront of their time. And that really chimes with what we're trying to do now in the 21st century. There's a brilliant book just to recommend to you called The Victorian Internet by Tom Standage, book of 1998. Because the other inventions that were happening were around the telegrams and all that sort of communication that was kind of proto-internet. Lectures would be advertised with straplines saying, "Come and find out the latest news in real time from another part of the world." There was that sort of, really sort of passionate embrace of new ideas, new technology, new ways of communicating. And that's a theme that underlies what we're trying to do. So, a continuation. We take a leap forward 150 years to now, and it's over to Jill to take you through this ride, and I'm lighting the blue touch paper.
Thank you.
And standing back. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Welcome, everyone. Thanks again for actually Adrian to invite me here. I really, really enjoyed being here last month, and I'm glad that we've got more time for questions at the end. So I'm going to be looking at the last 50 years. It's totally my choice of images. It's not an art history that's set in stone. There are many, many different kinds of lectures I could give at this point. And I'm going to miss out a great deal. So if your favourites aren't in here, I apologise now. So that's my web address. And if you want to email me, it's jill@lightsgoingon.com. Basically, that's my agency, and I make contemporary art accessible. That's my mission. So, off we go. So remember in the first lecture, those of you that were here, we looked at the huge change that came after the Industrial Revolution that allowed artists and thinkers to explore the idea of progress and utopia. It made different thinking possible and was the beginning of modernism. So when we talk about postmodernism, I take that to be from mid to late 60s, though as we know that's a very flexible and fluid kind of area. But this is because at this moment in time, again we see a lot of change, a lot of different thinking. People are burning their bras. You know, Betty Friedan's writing The Feminine Mystique in America, looking at the role of the housewife. Rachel Carson writes The Silent Spring in 1963, bringing to everyone's attention the use of pesticides. So ecology and the environment becomes very big on people's agendas. And artists begin to challenge the norm. So I think the last ism I left off at last time was pop art. Pop art, popular art, looking at commodification of art, as in, and this is Andy Warhol, Screenprint. So a number of artists, particularly in America, wanted to disavow that gallery system, to move outside the white cube space and to start making work that you couldn't actually sell, you know, to disavow that idea of commodification. So this ism is land art. This is an iconic piece of work, an iconic image, Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson. So Robert Smithson made this in 1970. It took 2 diggers, 1 tractor to move, I think it's 6,550 tons of rock and earth to make this shape in the Great Salt Lake in Utah. It's still there. For many years it was covered over with lots of rain, lots of different kind of weather conditions covered it up. But in the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a number of droughts, so that it's appeared again. So this is a moment when various artists were trying to revisit what the landscape meant to them through a kind of sculptural intervention. One could say with something like this, does it add to the landscape? Does it perhaps damage the landscape in some way because it's so big? And it took a lot of sort of earth moving to do it. This is Nancy Holt. Nancy Holt was married to Robert Smithson and was also a land artist. This is her 4 concrete tunnels, which are on the other side of the lake, which is still there. You can stand and look through them and see the sun at particular solstice moments. So it's quite a kind of 70s hippie kind of take, but actually really basic concrete tunnels, which I think it's like an alternative Stonehenge, if you like. And this is Walter de Maria. Did a number of key land artworks, but this is a piece, Earth Room, where he brings earth, literally tons of earth, into a room. Now this still exists. It's in an apartment in Worcester Street in New York. You can book to go and see it. I've never seen it, but because it's so big you can't really see the detail, but this is this mound of earth that gets raked every evening. Nothing grows in it, but apparently the smell is fantastic. You know, this kind of lovely earthy smell, you know, bringing the outside inside. And then in England we have our own, we have a couple of major land artists, one of them being Richard Long. Richard Long lives just outside Bristol. Richard Long studied at St Martin's. When he was in his final year, this is the photograph of a piece of work he made. He made a line made by walking. So Richard Long went out, was trying to work out what he was doing with his practice. What am I doing with my work? So he was walking like this. Oh, I made a line, flattening the grass. So Richard Long then says, so this is a sculpture made in the grass. It's also a performance because I'm walking, and then I've taken a photograph of it, so that photography becomes the evidence by which this work exists. And Richard Long has made his whole career from going on walks. I remember being a student and looking at, he makes concrete poems which are evidence of the walks. And I think, oh, he's just making it up. He's not really gone on a walk, he's just done a poem. But he does actually see him sometimes at Bristol Airport with rucksack on his back, 6'6", off he goes, don't know where he's going. So this is another example of one back 20 years later. But it's an interesting point to make about when you try to disavow the gallery system, when you try to make a statement which takes you out of the gallery business, the art world as a business, how do you survive as an artist? So land artists find themselves coming back to the gallery system to make money, to have works to sell. So this is a really big retrospective of Richard Long's at Tate Britain about 2 years ago. Don't know if anyone saw it. It was a fantastic exhibition, partly because he's so eloquent about his own practice, very accessible. So they had a number of phrases about his work written on the walls. But you can see he collects sort of, you know, basic materials from the landscape and then lays them out in these really clear patterns, you know, universal shapes, spirals, circles. He's also well known for doing these paintings, drawings, with his hands on the wall, big mud drawings. The mud comes from the River Avon, runs through Bristol. Another English land artist is Hamish Fulton. So Hamish Fulton was in two shows last year in England, in Birmingham and in Margate, and this was the one, Turner Contemporary in Margate, where he invited a number of people to go on a walk with him. So Hamish Fulton, for him, the walk is the work. Walking is everything. And he also makes a series of concrete poems to capture the feeling of walking. So here text becomes sculptural. It becomes really important as a piece of work in itself. So this is Richard Wilson. Richard Wilson, this is a piece bought by Saatchi, Charles Saatchi, when he first did it in 1987. And I think it still exists as a permanent installation in the new Saatchi building, though I'm ashamed to say I haven't been to the new one yet, though it's been open for ages. So this is called 2050, and it's sump oil. So the room is covered in sump oil. So this here, has anyone been in it? Yeah. It's an amazing experience because, again, it's a bit like that earth room. It smells, and it's shiny, and it's like a black pond, and you lose yourself in it. So here, you can see he's standing in it. Is this sort of black corridor that goes right through the middle of the installation. So you can literally walk into and be in the middle of this oil. You know, and you can say, is that a statement about, how we use and abuse oil, the waste? You know, what are we doing? Fantastic artist, Richard Wilson. So this is Anna Mendieta. Anna Mendieta, this is her using her body within the landscape, within the land, seeing herself almost as Mother Nature, Mother Earth, taking herself naked into the landscape and trying to hide herself, in a sense, her silhouette of pieces, where she covers herself in flowers or hides in bark or presses herself into mud. Again, these exist as photographs. So that leads me nicely on to sort of feminist art, which is a funny old title, but there we are. So in the 70s was a moment for women to finally be visible, if you like. I think we made a note of that in the first lecture. You know, where are the women? You know, and in the 70s, beginning of the 70s, there were a number of key feminist philosophers and theorists writing, why are there no great women artists? Well, because they haven't been talked about in the same way. But now this is the moment in the 70s where women can start to have a voice, start to be visible. So women start to reclaim themselves as, like Anna Mendieta, as mothers, as people who knit, you know, to celebrate, you know, women's work as knitters and sewers. So this is Louise Bourgeois, who I mentioned last time, 1965, 7 in a bed, lots of funny made shapes. And this is Nancy Spiro. Nancy Spiro used printmaking and did a number of fantastic large works, like scrolls, which look at women goddesses, strong women, women from historical times. You know, doing stuff, being different things, being strong, running. And this is Carol Schienemann in 1976. So Carol Schienemann used her body as the vehicle for art. So this is her body is the pencil, is the paintbrush, where she's making marks. She's very, you know, totally visible. Here I am as the work itself. Carol Schienemann was really an interesting artist, and there are much more ruder images I could have shown, but I held back. So with all that Mother Earth, and you know, there's a bit of talk about menstrual flow, messy stuff like that we shouldn't really go there. It was starting to be fairly easy for women again to be sidelined. Oh, that's women's stuff. So some women artists position themselves very much within a theoretical agenda. So here we have Mary Kelly dealing with her subject matter is her child. For 3 years, she documents her son from when he is born to when he has language. So she shows his soiled, she shows everything about him. His first words, his first drawings, his soiled nappies. There was a huge furore when she showed his nappies all neatly framed, you know, unwashed, in the gallery in 1976. But what Mary Kelly does is she packages it up and conceptualizes the practice. You know, so it's, I mean, you can see it's really cold, really, well, cool. It's really cool, really thoughtfully laid out, like a collection. Yeah. So it's easier to understand as not just, you know, women's work. And then Martha Rossler is an American artist. From the first lecture, we touched briefly on photo montage and photo collage. And Martha Rossler, for most of her life, has worked with this medium, taking contemporary images and trying to make statements about the role of women and the war. You know, so this is Cleaning the Drapes in 1972, and you know, an image from the Vietnam War, and a more recent one, Bringing the War Home. And just popped in Sarah Lucas, you know, self-portrait and fried eggs, because without that kind of lineage, without that kind of work that happened in the 70s, people like Sarah Lucas, you know, they should look back and thank what happened in the 70s, because it allows Sarah Lucas to be androgynous, to be like that to the establishment, to put 2 fried eggs on her chest, to play with food, to be half mad, you know, look at her, scary, you know, making that kind of statement even in 1996. So, one of the major things that came out of the late 60s, early 70s, as I've said it a few times now, is that women and men, but mostly women, start to use their bodies as a site for art. The body itself is the work. So in 1965, Yoko Ono sits on stage in New York, in a theatre, and invites the audience to come and cut a piece from her clothing. She has a nice suit made, and she sits there really very zen, very calmly. People just come up, you get your scissors, you cut a piece, and you can keep that piece. And this work, which can be seen as a violent act, but it implicates you, the audience. It starts to ask you to be involved. Come on up, work with me. Not exactly do what you like with me, but it's an invitation. And Yoko Ono has done this a few times since, 5 or 6 times. This was one in 2003 in Paris, where she did it to try and bring people's attention to peace, you know, for peace in the world. So cut peace, peace. You know, imagine. And it looks quite different in a way. This older woman, more fragile maybe, maybe not, as she becomes more naked. It's a different kind of reading, don't you think, to this very young woman, both vulnerable. So this is Marina Abramovic. So Marina Abramovic in 1975 uses her body for a number of years, pushes her body to the extremes. This is a photograph of her when she has flagellated herself, cut a Star of David in her stomach, laying on ice, laying on hot coals, poured honey over herself, in a kind of ritualistic. How far can I go? How will my body survive? And she does all this in front of an audience. So that thing about you are implicated in what you are looking at. Does anyone say, stop, Marina, you are hurting yourself. You are a human being that's cutting a Star of David in your stomach. No, because it's coded as art, it's her body, she can do as she wishes with it. But you are watching that. Of course, the only evidence of this is the photograph. One of the main things that comes from this time is that these performances, these live acts, exist as either video or photography. So in the last 10, 15 years, a number of people have reenacted these performances so that it relives itself. So in 1977, Marina meets Ule, and they become a couple in all sorts of ways. They live together, and they make work together for the next 10 years. So their work becomes a duel and a duet, a duo of making work, which is about two people joined together. This is a really well-known piece where they stand in a doorway with no clothes on, and then you have to squeeze by, and you have to choose which one you're going to brush past. You know? Which genital organ shall I go by? Now, this is an interesting reenactment, if you like, where Eva and Franco Matti's, another couple, in the last 4 years, have created a number of artworks, recreated them in Second Life, online. So Second Life is where you, any of us, could become an avatar. You know, I could become a man in Second Life and run around and do stuff, shoot people, whatever I wanted. So this is them recreating, I think it's about 7 artworks. So this is, so this is the avatars of that work. So So in 2010, Marina Abramovic had well, not exactly a retrospective, but a big show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And it was called The Artist is Present. And this piece of work is where she sat for 3 months in a space, in a gallery, and people queued to sit opposite her. The artist is present. This is an invitation. You can come and sit opposite me, and I will look at you, and you will look at me, and we will not speak. We will just see each other. So, as you can see, she's 67 now, incredibly charismatic person. So, you come and sit opposite her. Has anyone seen the documentary of this? Yeah. So, there's this thing where she goes, it's like this, and then she does this. It just looks, and it's so intense. It's really powerful. And people cry. Because it's like, someone's looking into your soul. So there is a fantastic website called Marina Made Me Cry, which shows how long it took. So this young man lasted for 28 minutes before he cried. And this person took 2. So I think it's a real indictment of how we don't actually look at each other. We don't really see each other. And it's about this fundamental need, isn't it, to be seen. And then I just popped this in. This is Pippin Barr. She's made a game. So in 2011, which is directly lifted from that work. Now, you know, when you buy those games, when you see all the games on Nintendo, they're all about killing and action, doing stuff. This is a game where you're waiting. So this is a game about waiting, which I think is hilarious. So it looks really old-fashioned. It looks really Nintendo, and then you'll just become one of those people waiting. So that's my little take on performance art. But as you can see, it's something that I find really interesting to talk about, and there's loads of things to say about it. Marina teaches people as well, so yeah. Anyway, so minimalism. Can everyone hear me okay still? Yeah. Okay, so the end of the 1960s, basically 4 artists started working with the new materials that were available at the end of the 1960s. Industrial materials, fundamental materials, fluorescent tubes, aluminium. And minimalism, you know, it's literally exactly as it says. It's minimal art. It's just about the stuff. It's just about the material. Let me just show you an example. So this is Carl Andre's fire bricks in 1976 that were bought by the Tate. It was on the front page of the Mirror. Ah, what a waste of money, it's just some bricks. But this is Carl Andre trying to explore how to say something with hardly anything. If you remember Milevich's black on black, white, white painting on a white canvas in 1915, this is its equivalent in sculptural terms. So minimalism is said to have these properties. It's about truth because it's not trying to be anything other than what it is. It's about harmony, order, and simplicity. So some of you will hate this work and some of you will love it. At this moment, I think what happens with art and contemporary art is that there is this huge explosion of lots of different ways of looking at the world and working with different materials. So you can choose to like what you want to like. We all don't like the same thing. From this moment really comes all this choice. This is another Carl Andre from 2010. So you can see what it looks like in a white cube space, and you can walk on this. And this is Donald Judd in 1988. It's a bit later than when he first started working, but the Donald Judd Foundation in America holds a whole ton of his works that are outside and inside, and incredible when you see them en masse. Minimalism takes minimal form as well. It's about the line, it's about the rectangle, it's about the square, it's about the cube. basic shapes. You know, they have their own sense of beauty. So Dan Flavin takes fluorescent tubes and uses them to make light installations, which can look incredibly beautiful. It's about light. And that gives license to many other artists working with neon, working with fluorescence, working with light and colour. So this is Bruce Nauman in 1986, and this is Tracey Emin, another neon piece. I Promise to Love You. So Robert Morris is one of the other artists. Robert Morris is a really interesting artist because he's a fantastic writer, he's a performance artist, and he also worked with very minimal materials at this point, exploring with the other guys the sense of how to say a lot with a little. This is a classic example of a minimalist exhibition. But Robert Morris also moved into working with softer materials. So minimalism has a soft side, looking at anti-form, if you like, looking at how you might cut felt and how it might drape. So using things like cutting and snipping and draping to make, again, like almost, he's made some amazing ones out of grey shapes, which look like massive kimonos. Sorry, the slides aren't great, but this just gives you an idea about, you know, Robert Morris is trying then to mix the two, trying to show, oh, look at me, little thing, oh look, trying to show square shapes along with mess, you know, along with anti-form, trying to bring the two together. So now we're into that kind of work, aren't we, where you walk into a gallery and you go, what the hell's this? It's like walking into a skip. But I hope that what I'm saying today, at the end of it, you will have some more of a kind of understanding, if you haven't already, about where these things come from in people's heads. So this is a recent reenactment, if you like, which was at Tate Modern, 2010. This is a piece called Body, Motion, Spaces, Things, and it was a Robert Morris work from 1971, which had logs and platforms and various things you could push and get in. But in 1971, no health and safety, so they had to shut it after 4 days because everyone broke their legs. So we can just look at everyone. You know, everyone was having a great time. That's why they hurt themselves, because they were just dancing all over it. It was like being let out. And you go, yeah, I can jump on art. Fantastic. So this was a more ordered version, I think, with more health and safety, but tremendous fun. And this is a long quote, but interesting. So Robert Morris said this to a curator in 1971. Personally, I'd rather break my arm by falling off a platform than spend an hour in detached contemplation of a Matisse. We've become blind from so much seeing. Time to press up against things, squeeze around, crawl over. Not so much out of a childish naivety to return to the playground, but more to acknowledge that the world begins to exist at the limits of our skin, and what goes on at that interface between the physical self and external conditions doesn't detach us like the detached glance. So again, it's an invitation to join in, to be part of something, to use your body in the artwork. Whether you agree with it is another matter, but it is an invitation. So minimalism, you can see its effects within contemporary practice today. You know, the idea that you're using these basic shapes, playing with shapes. So this is Eva Hess in 1967. She worked a bit like Robert Morris in terms of anti-form, playing with materials, but again, trying to say something with not much. And this is Mona Hatoum in 2008, looking at things like cages and displacement. How are you doing for time? And this is Santiago Sierra from Mexico. Sorry, again, it's a bit blurred, but Santiago Sierra borrows from minimalism by taking things like the line and the box. So here he's using cardboard boxes, but he works with people as well. So this is a piece where he has invited homeless people in Guatemala to come and be in the gallery for a week and live underneath these cardboard boxes. So that's what it would look like. If there's a number of cardboard boxes set out in the gallery space, you come in, but there's people inside them. Santiago Sierra works on the edges of a kind of moral ethics around how we use people, how people get paid for their work. He's worked with prostitutes, all sorts of things. Again, interesting artist, you want to look him up. So this is another Eva Hesse, perhaps a better example of that anti-form. And also you sort of, this hanging, knitted jumble of things. And we have to ask ourselves, you know, when this gets recreated, as it does, as Eva Hesse died really young, is this exactly how it should look? You know, these folds and how this, how well thought out is it by Eva Hesse? But for me, her work gives others permission to also do similar kind of things. So this is Carla Black. Carla Black was in the Turner Prize last year, and she represented Scotland at the Venice Biennale. So she's having a moment. So she works with cheap materials. So this is a piece of polythene that you can buy in B&Q, and it's covered in blusher, makeup from Boots. And it's stretched and hung, and it floats. She calls them floating paintings. She doesn't want to make paintings, but she wants it to be in your eye level. So you look at this sort of pink cloud. And you can see also, you know, the less is more thing. That's what it looked like in Venice, in a palazzo, this kind of huge load of sugar paper and makeup. It looks randomly placed, but it's about anti-form. Okay, hopefully I've hammered that home. So, now we're on to conceptual art. All this is fairly interesting, perhaps difficult, perhaps weird stuff, so we can talk about it later. Okay, conceptual art, again, concepts. It's about ideas. So this comes out around the late 60s again. Well, actually mid-60s, late 60s. And this has a massive impact on contemporary practice. But remember, in my first lecture, we looked at Marcel Duchamp and the urinal, and that I'm saying he's a conceptual artist before his time. Okay, so Solloway is a key conceptual artist. This is his statement about what it means. In conceptual art, the idea or concept is the most important aspect of the work. When an artist uses a conceptual form of art, it means that all of the planning and decisions are made beforehand, and the execution is a perfunctory affair. The idea becomes a machine that makes the art. Okay? The idea is privileged over what it looks like. The idea is the important thing. So this is Lawrence Weiner. Lawrence Weiner's still alive. You can still phone Lawrence Weiner up. He lives in New York and on a boat in Amsterdam. And if you want to make a piece of his work for your gallery, you can phone him up and go, this is the context in which we want to show your work. How would you like us to show it? And he tells you. Because his work exists as a set of statements. Okay? So how this looks here, this is text that's made of tape. It's not painted, it's just stuck on with tape. So these exist as a set of statements on a piece of paper in the Tate archive. Lawrence Weiner realised back in the mid-60s that text was sculptural, that he could use text as his work. So he's done that ever since. So this is a piece at Tate St Ives when I was working there in 2009, and literally the curator did phone him up and say, okay, we've got these statements. How would you like them to look? And he went, okay, make them this high, make the biggest one this high, slope it over, and I'll have it in blue. So when he dies, it'll be up to, you know, up to the curator's decision. So, sorry, this is a bit dark, but this is almost like graffiti. So Lawrence Weiner makes text works in any kind of situation, within a gallery space, outside the gallery space. I've got a beer mat that he did in 1998 for an exhibition, which is a Lawrence Weiner beer mat, which I'm very pleased to have. So Joseph Kossuth is probably the most conceptual, I think, of all conceptual artists. Totally involved with language. He's a really good writer. He's written a fantastic book called Art After Philosophy and After, which isn't too heavy. But this is a piece of work called 1 and 3 Chairs. So this is what you see when you walk into the gallery space. You see on the wall a dictionary definition of a chair. I'll use my thing. Yay, dictionary definition. Then you see an actual chair, and then you see a photograph of a chair. So that's 3 chairs. So the 1 is the idea of the chair that's in your head. Yeah? When you read or look at the chair. Maybe you're thinking about another chair, but that's about your thought. So Solloway, like Lawrence Weiner, his work exists as a set of statements as well, but they exist as like, this is how you make this drawing on the wall. So he makes a whole series of wall drawings. So this is one of his later coloured wall drawings, which was installed in 2008. So Solloway entitles all his ideas, his drawings, as numbers. So this is, as you can see quite late on, 1102. I've seen technicians do one of these in black and white at Tate. You have to do it to the exact instructions. If you get it wrong, it all looks wrong when you get to the end. So you have to sort of rub it out and start again. So just to make the point that these can be permanent or temporary, they can appear on walls for a specific moment and then you paint over them. The work still exists on a piece of paper. So Martin Creed won the Turner Prize back in 2000 with a work called Lights Going On and Off, which is where I borrowed the name of my agency, Lights Going On. So he does a similar thing with labelling his work. So this is work number 567. It's a number of things, isn't it? It's working with neon, so it borrows from minimalism. It's about text. It's about the idea. You know, he's a contemporary conceptual artist. It can come in other colours. But Martin Creed can be quite fun as well. So he has a playful side to his ideas. So this is a piece of work which is you have a number of balloons that when they're all blown up, they make exactly half the air in a given space. So if we worked out how much volume of air this whole building took up, and then we halved it, and then we put that much air into, say, about 2,000 balloons, and that would fill this space, and then you're invited to go in. Has anyone been in? It was at Tate St Ives a few years ago. They get covered in hair, because lots of balloons, it's all about electricity, so it's quite interesting. I find it quite claustrophobic, because they're higher, they come quite short, so they're all higher than me. So. Okay, Art Povera. So in Italy, the end of the 60s, a number of artists started working with cheap everyday materials, a bit like Carla Black and her polythene. She borrows also from Art Povera. Literally translates as poor art, which doesn't mean the art's poor or poorly made. It means just working with something other than marble. You know, that classical tradition of carving that comes from Italy in the Renaissance. It's a kind of a version to that, a critique of that. So quite a lot of the Arte Povera artists are still alive. This is an artist called Michelangelo Pistoletto, fantastic name. So this is Venus and the Rags. So this is a pile of rags, apparently from his studio, that are used, everyday materials, alongside a classical Roman statue of Venus, though in fact this is it's a statue from a garden centre. This is taking the idea of the everyday, if you like, to the extreme. This is Yannis Kanellis bringing horses into a gallery in Rome in 1969. So they become what you look at. Yannis Kanellis makes fantastic work which deals with piles of things, basic things like books and stone and coal. So it also has remnants of land art, if you like, in it. You know, lots of these isms, people don't stay in them. These isms are things that we give these names to artists, but it's not necessarily that everyone stays in a category. Someone like Carla Black, you know, is working in a conceptual way with art, you know, in kind of everyday materials, borrowing from Arte Povera, but it's also very minimal. So everything's blurred around. And can you call anything a sculpture? Is this an installation? What is it? So this is where it all gets messy. This is the one woman who was part of Arte Povera is Marissa Mertz. So just to show you a couple of her works, which are a bit like Eva Hesse's in terms of things that hang down, that look knitted together, that fall from the ceiling, made of cheap aluminium that you can cut up. So, do I need to speed up? Yeah. So, I'll speed up. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the young British artists. The end of the 80s, Damien Hirst, when he's a student, he puts on a show for 16 other artists. So this is, you know, the moment when YBA's Young British Art starts. And whatever we think of Damien Hirst now, when I was a student and an artist, you know, the end of the 80s and the 90s, when he did this, it was amazing. You know, I think when we see something so much, you know, it's like looking at the Mona Lisa, isn't it? It becomes too familiar. You lose sight of what it actually meant at the time. So I think already, even though this is only 21 years ago, with this, we're in a moment of going, oh, that was that. Oh, God, it's had its day, it's rubbish, or whatever we're thinking about it. Perhaps we're not thinking that. But because we're now in my lifetime, I have a really strong memory of seeing this and being overawed by it, thinking it was fantastic. Here's a real shark in formaldehyde, and, you know, something you can really look at. It starts to critique museums, and then I saw this. Sorry, this isn't such a great slide either, big. This is Mother and Child Divided. So this is a cow and her calf, and cut in half, so you can walk in between and you see the inside of the animals. And again, I saw this at Venice, which is, you know, a city of water. So it really resonated. So there's something there, isn't there, about context, about when you see something in a kind of different context, different places, at different times in your life. It's like reading, isn't it? When you read a book 20 years ago and then you read it again, you think, why did I like that? It's just you were a different person then, different feelings. You knew things differently, or you knew less. So, did anyone see the Damien Hirst show? It's been on recently? Yeah. So, it was a fantastic example of seeing him do all this, I think, quite interesting work, and then coming round to the sort of money. So, this is where he's taken butterflies and arranged them, and they look incredibly beautiful. They're like stained glass windows. You know, it's all about sex and death and religion. Basic things. And then he did the skull, you know, which sells £50 million price tag on this. So Tracey Emin is another one of the most well-known young British artists. So this is her tent, which I don't think exists anymore. It got burnt in a warehouse fire. Everyone I have ever slept with doesn't necessarily mean everyone I've had sex with, just people that she's slept with. So this was her tent. So, you know, back to women's work, sewing, making statements about being a woman. Tracey Emin is totally about herself, her body, her abortions, her life. It's all displayed for you. Another person who wasn't at Goldsmiths, was at Glasgow, but was around at the same time, was Jenny Savile. Just had a big show at Modern Art Oxford. And again, when these came out, they were like, you know, Charles Saatchi bought all her degree show and then commissioned her to make 15 new paintings. So Jenny Savile could just paint. I mean, this is unheard of. Whatever we think of Saatchi, I remember at that moment thinking, well, it's amazing, because you just get used to being poor as an artist, and then suddenly this person who's like 22, she just got money. She can just carry on painting. And she made these paintings of flesh, of people. They were really big as well. So you were literally faced with these big things, beautifully painted. And then there's people like Savile, who's also lumped with the YBAs. Savile, you know, black British artist. So again in the 90s, another door that opened was for black British artists to have a voice, to make work that was heard, to be seen, to critique culture about what it's like to be, you know, black and also live in this culture. So this is one of his most controversial paintings, the Holy Virgin Mary, which shows a black Virgin Mary. If you look carefully at the things floating around her head, there's lots of stuck-on bottoms and boobies. So, and also this painting, though you can't really see it, rests on balls of elephant dung. So Savile's really going for it here, you know. And when this was in a show called Sensation, which was in 1997 at the Royal Academy, which was all about shock. Oh, look, all this work is shocking. So there was lots of talk at the time about taboo subjects. Some of it was really hurtful and shocking, actually. But it's that thing about, where do we ever talk about these things? You know, what is art for? What do we want art to do for us? Do we want to just see beauty? Do we want to think differently about things? Do we want to challenge our thinking? Or look at taboo subjects that we don't normally talk about? Has all that to offer. But when Sensation travelled to New York, Brooklyn Museum, well, the mayor threatened to shut the whole show down because of this image. And this is Cara Walker, black American artist, working in the 90s, still working today, making what looks like really beautiful cameos, which are massive black cutouts, but which totally look at slavery and the history of slavery, and can be quite upsetting when you see them en masse. They're really powerful pieces of work. And this is Donald Rodney, who had sickle cell anemia, and this is a little house made of his skin, pinned together. So, just briefly to talk about film. So in the 90s as well, that's when the black box appeared. You know, we get used to walking into the gallery space and looking at the white walls, the white cube. What happened was that there was a black box. But you could go into a black box and you saw a video. Artists started working with film and video in the 90s. And one of the most well-known artists is Douglas Gordon, again coming out of Glasgow School of Art. Douglas Gordon became well known for slowing down films. So he was looking at cinema itself and looking at our attention spans, looking at what it means to take time and slow something down. So this is 24 Hour Psycho. So Hitchcock's Psycho is slowed down to take 24 hours to view the whole thing. This is an extreme version of that, where he, for Leon Biennial, he takes the film The Searchers, the Western, and slows it down for 5 years. So it takes, it takes 6 hours for one frame to come up. So, I remember seeing this when it came out on video. I didn't see it in the flesh, and it was in the town square in Lyon. So imagine these people going to work in the morning, and you see like a bit of horse's head up there on the screen, and then you come back in the night, and it's just kind of moved like this much. So really what this is all about is totally looking at how we look. What does narrative mean? But just to point out that Andy Warhol was doing something with real time and film back in the 60s. He filmed his lover sleeping for 6 hours. So you can watch this. I mean, it's really boring. It's real time, just watching someone sleeping. But Warhol did it back then. Just a really recent film that was in the British Art Show last year is Christian Marclay's The Clock, which is a very exciting piece of work which lasts for 24 hours, and every minute shows a clip from a film which shows that time. So if you come in and you start watching the film at 2 o'clock, there'll be a clip up which has Big Ben or something in the background which says 2 o'clock. And then at 2:01, it will change to 2:01. So you'll see whatever that is, that's 6 minutes past 4. So when this shows and they do 24-hour screenings of it, you just get people queuing at 1 a.m. in the morning to go in. And at the British Art Show, people kept coming back at different times to see it, because it's absolutely gripping, because it still kind of tells a story. There's hundreds of thousands of film clips in there. Okay, so I'm going to stop soon. I'm going to miss out some of this, but I'm just going to talk briefly about relational aesthetics. So this is probably the last ism. So in the late 90s, a curator called Nicholas Bourriard identified a number of artists that had been working in the 90s where they were making work which involved people, that it was concerned with people and their relationship to the artwork, relational, their relation, where art is a state of encounter. So a few examples of that. So this is Carsten Huller's slides in 2006 at Tate Turbine Hall. So here, the invitation is to go down these slides. Great. I never did, too scared. But I did watch. And all these people are watching. So what you have is a relationship where you are watching people taking part, but you are also standing next to other people that are involved in that relationship. However, if no one is there, those are still very beautiful sculptural things. They just invite people to participate. The work, if you like, is completed by people entering into a dialogue or movement with that work. So this is Felix Gonzalez-Torres, and this piece of work is a pile of candy on the floor. And it's called Untitled, brackets, Portray of Ross. So Ross was Felix's boyfriend, and Ross had HIV. And at his ideal weight, he should have been 176 pounds. So this is a portrait of Ross at his ideal weight. So the sweets, if you weighed them, they'd weigh 176 pounds. But the invitation is for you, the visitor, to take a sweet. So this, when you see people, they realise they can take sweet. You see people grabbing like handfuls of it and putting them in their pockets. But when you know that this represents a person, and you take a sweet and you unwrap it and you put it in your mouth, it's just such a kind of religious act. It's incredibly moving. But it can exist just as a pile of candy. And at the end of each day, the invigilators make sure that it weighs 176 pounds again. And this is the Weather Project, which was at the Turbine Hall by Oliver Eliasson. So this was a false sun with a mirror. The ceiling, the really high ceiling, was mirrored. So this unexpected thing happened where people came in and went, oh, the sun! And they all laid down, like they were sunbathing. And then when they saw themselves in the mirror, they started making shapes. So they were all like, there was this involuntary mass coming together where people made star shapes with people they didn't know. Relational aesthetics. This is different to socially engaged practice. Socially engaged practice is where an artist works with people to make the work. So this is Jeremy Deller, inviting people, ex-miners, policemen who were actually part of this, to reenact the Battle of Orgreave, which is when the miners clashed with policemen in the 80s, part of Thatcher's reign. So this is a this is lots of things. This is a reenactment, it's a film, but it's also socially engaged practice, because without people being involved, it wouldn't exist. Okay, it's 11:10, so should we stop there? I have loads more, but I'm going to have to stop.
I warned you, didn't I? Thank you, Jill. That was amazing. And I know how difficult and impossible task that you've been set over these 2 lectures. But the whole idea behind the 2 introductory lectures is to provide that context for the following speakers, actually, who will be joining us over the next few months. So the artists that we're commissioning for the new museum are going to be visiting and meeting you and talking about their work over the coming months. And as I say, the full programme is available. What I wanted Jill to do, and what she's achieved, I think, incredibly well, is to set the context for what happens next when we meet the artists that Shrewsbury is working with, and that we continue the discussion about contemporary art practice, what it means, where's it going, what do we know? You know, there's a great deal of uncertainty and blurring and all the things that Jill's referred to. But at least I think we can sort of go to the next part of this lecture series with that bigger background, that bigger picture, and we can discuss a little bit now and take some questions and comments. And we hope that will spark all sorts of ideas for when you come back and meet the artists that we're working with. Okay, I'm just going to throw it open. I know this is an intimidating moment in a way, but I'd love to have some questions or comments. And what I'll do is I'll repeat the question back to you. We haven't got a radio mic, we haven't gone for all that technology, but if you can keep your comment or question relatively short because of my memory, I'll be able to relay it back to the audience. Is there anybody that would like to kick off? Thank you.
This is about conceptual art, really. The statement that you put up was saying that it's about the idea or the concept. The difficulty for me is it isn't obvious, looking at the pieces, what the idea is.
Okay. Question was about conceptual art and how that the lady understands the idea behind conceptual art, but when confronted with the work in a gallery, it isn't obvious. It's difficult.
To know what the idea is.
To know what the idea is. Okay, so that's the question.
Or would you like me to? Would you like me to talk a bit about how you then get access to that? Yeah, it's really hard. It's partly why I set up Lights Going On, because I got really upset and frustrated with people coming into contemporary space where I worked at Icon and then Arnold Feeney and going, what is this? Artists are full of ideas, aren't they? And they put their ideas into their work. Does it matter if you don't understand the idea? Because when you come into it cold, what it asks really is that you read about it before you come, isn't it? It always asks you to research, to understand it better. Because when you come to something cold, which is alienating, like a black bin liner half full of gallery air, it's just a black bin liner, you go, why is that? Why? What is it? It's you have to read about it, don't you? You have to have a conversation about it, because what's happened is that the idea isn't obvious, that the visual itself is not the important thing. The idea is, but the idea is not so available to you. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. It's a massive challenge, and it sets up all sorts of frustrations with visitors, because you think, how do I understand what I'm looking at? Lots of artists today research so that they borrow from all sorts of historical moments. And I mean, Steve Claydon is an artist who made this huge bell that hung in the British Art Show, and on it were engravings of Snoopy and something from a Pasolini film. And I've never seen a Pasolini film, so at that moment I'm going, does it matter to me that I don't understand what that is? All I can do is look at this bell and think, is it a nice bell? What do I get from it? And at that moment I think we can ask ourselves, is this work then not very good? Because I am not able to get what I need from it. Because it puts you in a position always of lack, isn't it? That I don't know, I don't know. Now, I wouldn't say that artists do that deliberately, because lots of people say to me, oh, they're just taking the mickey, they want us to feel stupid. That's not the case. I think that artists generally are driven to explore their own practice and their own ideas, but in a sense they just leave it open for you to come to it. But it means nowadays that you have to come to it with an open mind, and you have to do a bit of reading. It helps. One thing I've been doing is working with lots of galleries to work with invigilators to engage people in conversations, to ask questions about work, so that at least you can have that. Because lots of people don't really want to read heavy text about something. But it is tricky. Yeah. Has anyone got anything else to say about this? Because it is you are actually on the nugget of why it's tricky.
Yes, anything?
I think
someone else.
I'll just say about working as an artist, I think it's really important to know how much information to give about a piece of work. Yeah. And you also want people to read it. You want to kind of leave a trail of breadcrumbs, or leave some clues, so that people can actually work their way into it, rather than make it too easy by saying exactly what it is.
Okay, I'll just summarise that just for people, just in case they didn't catch it. But Jill's an artist, and the dilemma: do you make it too obvious, or do you leave some mystery around it? It's how far do you interpret the work for visitors when you actually want to leave things open-ended to a certain extent. As a curator, it's always a dilemma. Do I put a big label up on the wall explaining the work, or do I actually ask visitors to work a little bit harder and leave it open-ended? And somewhere there's a balance. Somewhere there has to be a balance. You can end up patronising, or you can end up confusing and alienating. It's always a difficult line. Thank you.
The struggle I've had over the years, I've sort of come to look at art as the artist telling the story of what's happening now.
Yeah.
When the problem with the foot and mouth disease happened in 2001, I'd seen Damien Hirst's calf cut in half and walked between it in 10 years before.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what the heck is he on about? Then when I saw those diggers with animals' legs sticking out, I thought he told the story before it happened. And when I look back at Renaissance, that was about religion, and arts and crafts was what they were doing, lots of decorative Victorian stuff. And I feel that if I apply that, it's what's happening now.
Yeah.
It's, is this how we're treating the world?
Yeah.
So, a plastic bag with whatever in it, it's got nothing in it because actually the kids chuck the rubbish on the street. And I think that's helped me look at it.
I'll just try and if you summarise that very quickly, it's about the difficulty of experiencing contemporary art. You sometimes need time. The lady here was talking about having seen a Damien Hirst piece and not really, maybe not got it or not related to it very strongly until Foot and Mouth was happening some years later, and all of a sudden you realise that your experience of an object through time changes your perception of it, and it takes on a different meaning, it has a different resonance. Okay.
Can I just say as well that you never know how something's affected you. You know, when you see something, I mean, British Art Show, right, I saw it at the Hayward, I went in, there's 4 paintings by Phoebe Unwin, I was like, yeah, whatever, hate them, or just, whoa, they're messy. And then I looked at all the other work stuff, went away. 2 weeks later, I was thinking, what was Phoebe Unwin trying to do? They went in. I didn't even know they went in. I was like, what's going on? And I think that is, if you don't get it straight away, you never quite know where it's gone inside you. Some things you will never think of again, but then sometimes something triggers and it's really there again for you.
Okay, it's great to see hands going up. I'll come over there first, then to you, Sue. Yes?
What about delight?
Yes.
I think of Anish Kapoor,
Yes.
some of his pieces,
Yeah.
which are just so beautiful.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
stand in front of them and enjoy them.
Yes.
Why do we always have to
Yeah.
work hard
Yeah.
or do
Sure.
research?
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you know,
Well
I look
said.
at so much art. I yearn to find something which moves me here. You know? I too. I see so much work, I think, oh God, here we go again. You know, I'm using my head all the time. What really I yearn for is when both happen. When that happens, like with the Christian Markley film, it's just amazing. You know, it's exciting, it's engaging, it's a delight to watch, but it's clever, it's got all that going on. I continue to look at contemporary art in the hope. I have hope that I will find something. On the way, not all of it is doing that, but it's just about keep looking. You can't get put off. But I absolutely agree. You find the artists that speak to you individually.
Who was it that said art is a comfy chair?
No. Matisse?
Matisse, I think. I'm pretty sure it was Matisse. So, and then there's the other extreme, where it's incredibly challenging and difficult and intellectual. Somewhere, like with Jill, I think, something that does... The comfy chair thing I don't like so much. The delight I like so much.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Delight's a great word.
Lovely word.
But it's that combination, isn't it, of head and heart. Sue?
I just wanted to say that I think it's more about having a very open mind, and I'm not so keen on the idea that you have to. You might want to do research, but because actually when we look at art from the past, and we look at the old masters and like Turner and Matisse, and you know, Manet and people like that, all those paintings, all those pieces of art and sculptures referred to things that are actually quite hidden from us now. You know, things that had enormous meaning for the artists and probably for people looking at them then, that we find very difficult to bring to it. So I think for me it's more like you go, you have a very open mind and it means something to you and you get what you think it has to be.
Yeah.
Not thinking, I'm trying to understand what this person's meaning. Because actually, if they were going to, they just write a book, wouldn't they? They wouldn't bother to be smart.
Some of them do.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just show you this briefly because you talked about the open-endedness and the if we agree that artists reflect society, you know, they're not, we've got artists here today, we're just human beings, just working in this context, then we deserve the art we get. Art reflects back to us what's happening. So if here we are in this recession, total mess, no one knows where we're going. Then this thing about doubt and uncertainty rather than progress. We are doing this thing, we are going round and round in circles, and art is doing that as well. It's looking back all the time. Is it really moving forward? Just want to, just this as well, where there's so much contemporary art. You know, there's this massive population in the world, there's loads of curators, and there's loads of artists. So, on the one hand, you have lots to look at, lots to reject, and some things to find delight in. But what it gives us is, there's loads of biennials happening all the time, all over the world. So the art world, it is a business. You know, Frieze Art Fair has just happened in London, which had, for the first time, an old masters bit, didn't it, which you might want to say a bit more about. Yeah. But I think this is a nice phrase. We're always in a state of art lag. You know that thing about new technology, I always feel like that, this anxiety that I will never quite get there, because there's all this new stuff all the time. And two thinkers writing today, so Arthur Danto is pointing out that, you know, modernism was tied to the idea of progress and going forward. But now where are we? And I think that's this key thing, is that if I say in the last 10 years, where are we? We can't name where we are. We don't really know. We can't package it up. But if the answer is nowhere, we are destined to remain here. So Fukuyama's writing, is this the end of history? We are in a system that will stay the same. Bit depressing, that, because we want to think that we are moving forward. But I think this is why artists, they can return to history, they can come to the museum, they can borrow. Everyone is borrowing from art history, everyone is borrowing from the past. Like I was saying, borrowing from film, because you can. The internet allows artists to take whatever they want. Yeah. We've got 5 minutes.
Yep.
Anything anyone's...
Yes, Lalji.
I guess my question is probably what the rest of the series will answer. Is here we have the artist as a person who is reflecting his own views and his own personality, or her own views or her own personality. We've got an artist as a conveyor of a school, modernist, postmodernist ideas and so on. And somehow we want to exploit and use that person within a museum context, when the message should be a message about the artifacts in the museum.
Yes.
We're not going to the museum to see the view of Damien Hirst and his calf.
No.
We're going to the museum to see the ceramics or the geology or whatever's in the museum. And I'm wrestling with the idea of how an artist is ready to marry their own personality and ideas and context with the aim of the museum and the actual objects and artifacts in the museum. And I can see that's a real conundrum.
It's a challenge, yeah. Was that audible back there? Yeah, this relationship between contemporary art practices and the museum. I'm not going to avoid the question. It is very much the subject of the rest of the series, with examples, with artists coming to talk about how they've developed that relationship. All I would say is that the contemporary art program at the new museum is not a standalone program. It entirely exists to give you that dual experience of revisiting historic collections alongside the practice of a contemporary artist. And I think you'll hear from the artists as we go through the series. It's not easy, it is challenging, but they all have a real passion for engaging people with the historic collections alongside their own work. I would say in all of the cases, they've almost gone too far. Sometimes I have to remind them that it's about them as an artist as well, because they get so enmeshed and they take such delight in trying to reinterpret or make clear the history of objects. And that's why I've chosen them, because they're artists whose work naturally grows out of that inquiry into history, material culture, museum collections. None of the artists we're working with, in my opinion, have I had to force that marriage. It's been a very, very happy and creative and challenging relationship. More of which, obviously, as we go through the series. But yes, absolutely fantastic questions. Wow, really good. We'll take 2 more.
Just one about education.
Yeah.
Because it's scary at the moment what's happening in the bigger picture of education, where it's going. But I think it was Wakeman children who went to the seaside, Welsh coast, and performed art there. And that to me was absolutely wonderful and moving, but really sad in terms of the fact that the Wakeman school is closing.
Okay. Shall I repeat that back? Okay. I'm having trouble summarising that, actually.
Well, it's just making sure that our kids are getting what they need and aren't feeling left out of.
Yeah. Really, the latest concern is
in a creative way, and that's what education is actually all about. And all this bloody stuff that's going on at the moment that I feel
scary.
strongly about. Yeah. You know, we really must give them the opportunities to be themselves and be creative.
What's just recently been announced as a possibility is that art and music, you know, get further cut from the national curriculum.
It's just
so,
very, very
we're not investing in the creativity of our children if we don't keep those subjects, in there. So yes, really worrying times in that respect. There was one other hand. Paula.
No, I don't have. You have to
Oh yes. Paula's put her hand up not to ask a question, but to remind me to say something before we depart. I've got right. Got two things actually that I must remember to do. One is we do really value your feedback. Okay, and some of you have had a feedback form on the seat. We've had to rush off and photocopy some extras, so there are feedback forms available. If you haven't got one, we'd be really, really grateful if you could collect and just spend a minute just to give us a few thoughts. Anybody who's here before, don't worry about the questions about the venue. We've got that information from you. But your feedback on each of the individual lectures is going to be so critical to us as we move forward. So just thank you for that. And just to say that there is a more creative, in a way, option on the feedback this time. This is a piece of paper that I'll make available, hand out to people, based on a thing that we're doing at the museum at the moment, which is to do with creative writing. And it's saying here, Artist's Illustrated Talk. Write a poem in 10 words. We invite you to write a poem in 10 words responding to the talk that you've heard today. As open as that. You can even give us a little drawing. We don't mind. Evaluation, feedback, we want technical stuff. We want creative stuff as well.
Where will it go? Will it go on a website?
I don't know yet. I'll see what comes back.
Yeah.
But just to say, your feedback is really valuable to us and we are using it. And then the final thing, to just say that on behalf of, there's a group of artists who are going to come into the series as we move through, as well as the artists we've commissioned to be curators. We have another programme running, which is a group of artists who are based in Shropshire. There are 8 artists in the group. We appointed them to work with us as a team leading up to the opening of the museum, and they all went through a very difficult interview to make sure that they were really into their history and museum collections first. That group are having a small exhibition of kind of work in progress, how they're going so far in the process, and that's at Rowley's House. So where we are at the moment, Rowley's House. The show it's open to the public on the 10th of November. We'll hopefully get invitations to those people who have left email addresses for us. So I'll just say that again. But that was what I wanted to announce. There is some activity currently in the museum, or as of 10th of November, which explores this ground as well. Right, I'd just like to say a huge thanks for being here. The discussions are beginning to, was really interesting, even within the few minutes that we've had. And we'll make that part of the process as we continue. Jill Nichols about to go off to India for a month. Yay.
I'll be back though next July.
But is coming back for the final one of the series in July next year.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, can we give Jill a really massive thank you?